My understanding, but I'll take it anyway. Yeah. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Please continue with your main course. If you've not yet finished, we're going to crack on with our feature part of the event today. Just before we get to that, though, you may or may not be aware, earlier this month we had our Scholarship Awards dinner, which is always a fantastic night, and fair to say the finalists and the winners were super excited to be involved, and of course the winners were beyond themselves. Thank you to our sponsors who made that awards program possible, and to give you an idea of just how happy this award does make our winners, Simon Crocetta, who wasn't able to be there on the night. He was studying in Portugal at the time, so couldn't be in the room, but was watching online, and check out his reaction. Fair to say he was pretty pumped.
Finally we came to a decision on one of the finalists. It was really difficult. Unfortunately, he can't be here tonight because he is now but his family's here, and I would like to offer them it is for Simon Crocetta.
Yes! Let's go! Let's go!
And Simon's actually in the room today. There he is. Stand up, Simon. What a show. Simon, we've got the river just out there, so can you recreate that for us now? No worries, you're on. Congratulations, Simon. We can give you a round of applause now that you're actually here. Well done to you, and well done to all of our other scholarship winners as well. Before we invite our guest speaker up to the stage, please get your phones out if you haven't got them out already. We do have the Q&A portal, which is now open, the Slido app, so scan the QR code on the screen there. If you want to do it the other way and put in the code, 25May2 is the code that you need to take us into the session here this afternoon. Time permitting, we'll get to a few of your questions at the end of my chat with David. Just before I get him up, I just wanted to mention the Mining Club's partnership with Miners Promise, and once again we're donating a percentage of every ticket sale from our lunch events to Miners Promise. So last month we raised a bit over $1,500, so thank you very much to those who were here. Your attendance today assists Miners Promise with the incredibly important work that they do, supporting families in their time of great need. So if you'd like any more information about Miners Promise, it's a fantastic initiative. Deb Morrow is here with us this afternoon. Where's Deb? Hello, Deb. Deb is just on table 28. So if you want any more info, go and see Deb about Miners Promise. All right, we promised something quite different today, and the time is now upon us. It's a little bit out of left field, our topic of discussion this afternoon. This is a fascinating tale of the modern-day construction of a multi-generational solar evaporation operation, which produces both salt and sulphate of potash. It's about 100 k's south of Karratha. They've got some serious financial backing and a board loaded with experience, power and talent. And now the Mardi project is fast approaching the production phase. So lots of questions about salt. I've got to say, I was coming in pretty cold on this as a general topic, so I'm looking forward to learning much, much more about it. So would you please welcome the Managing Director of BCI Minerals, David Boshoff, up to the stage, who's going to tell us all about salts. As he makes his way up, we have a short video to show you, so please turn your eyes to the screens.
BCI Minerals is leading the way in delivering sustainable resources for the modern world. Our success story begins with, and belongs to, our community. We have fostered a community that values and empowers its people. From our iron ore origins to leading Australia's salt industry, every step of our evolution is guided by our culture, values and a shared vision. The next step of that evolution is the Mardi Salt and Potash Project. Strategically located in the world's premier region for large-scale solar salt production, 80 kilometres south of Karratha, the Mardi project will deliver 5.3 million tonnes per annum of low-cost, world-class, sustainable, high-quality industrial salt and sulphate of potash for global markets.
Behind me, you can see the pumps that we started. This marks the beginning of a 2-year journey for the water behind me to make its way through the ponds, into the crystallizers, through a salt plant, and eventually on a jetty and on a vessel off to our customers.
As the country's first major salt project in 25 years, the Mardi project will produce a vital resource for thousands of industrial and manufacturing processes, from paper and PVC production to developing clean technologies, all powered by 99% renewable energy.
During the design phase, we optimised the jetty to reduce the disruption to the seabed and the underwater environment by increasing the gap between piles along the jetty. Typically it's 20 to 24 metre spacing. On this project we've increased that to 27, and that allows us to decrease the amount of disturbance we're doing to the underwater environment by about 10%.
It's a big project over many, many decades. It will create 1,000 jobs over its 60 years of operation. And really importantly, it will provide salt for industry.
With current demand for industrial salt from the Asian market at 160 million tonnes per annum and projected to increase by 30% in the next decade, the Mardi project is perfectly placed to generate long-term value.
Worldwide at the moment, there is actually a shortage of industrial salt. So this Mardi Salt project is going to provide an important new source of salt for industrial and manufacturing projects right across the globe.
With Mardi, BCI Minerals is not just building a project, it's building a future for generations to come.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here, and I thank the Mining Club for the invitation to speak today. My goal today is to let you walk out of this room with two things. First thing, to get to know a little bit more about the largest salt operation in Australia. And secondly, Tim showed us the shaker, to know that our salt is not what is inside the shaker, but actually what the shaker is made of. So this shaker has got a bit of ceramic. There'll be some glazing on it at the bottom. Yeah, there's a little plug in it. All of that will have sodium, NaCl in its production process. And this particular one will be from the chlor-alkali side of that production cycle. So hopefully you'll take a little bit away from that. But let's start with our values. There we go. The first thing for me, a very important thing for me to share with you, is that BCI is a values-driven organisation. Now, it's easy to say, but I think what's really important is that as leaders and, of course, as team members, we have to live that every day. Now, for our organisation, you can see the values up there. We came up with these values with a team probably about 2 years ago. They're nice and simple, easy to understand, and these values we refer to at least every 90 days. The team measures me against these values, and we measure each team member in the whole company against how we've behaved against these values. And I'll give you one quick example. A couple of months ago, the leadership team had to score me on how I'm behaving against these values. Quite simple. A plus means you are always demonstrating this value, a plus minus sometimes, and a minus rarely. And I didn't get pluses for all of those values. The team said to me, one of those, I'm a plus minus. And that encouraged a really vulnerable and transparent conversation about what do we expect and how do we expect our teams to show up. And I think it's very important that those values drive your business. And what I'll share with you today is that many of these values, the one we talk a lot about is find a way through approvals, we find a way through construction, find a way to manage the budget properly, and eventually find a way to get that first salt on ship. Now, I spoke a little bit about the uses of salt, our beautiful shaker up here, but there's so much that salt is used for in our everyday lives. I'll point to the table, so the glasses on your table, that's definitely got industrial salt in its production process. The plates will have it in. Even the cloth of the table fiber, the tablecloth will have fibers in there from textiles, that'll have salt in it. Your clothing will have some sort of polyester or elasticine in it. That definitely has got salt in its production process. And I think before I started this role, certainly, I was unaware of all these different and very important uses of salt that makes our lives what it is today. Now, in terms of the Māori project, we mentioned there at the the beginning video, that this will be and is the largest operation in Australia for industrial salt. You can see on the left-hand side of that graph, that's the worldwide operation. So the operation will be the third largest in the world once we're in full production, and it's the largest industrial salt producer in Australia. Now, most of Australia's industrial salt operations are based on the coast here in Pilbara, and you can see those in those little blue dots, blue dot where we are, and the amber dots of all those existing operations. Now, many of you might have been either contracted out of those operations or might have worked there. Many of these operations have been in operation for decades, and it's such an ideal place to produce salt. In WA or in Australia, we're blessed with extremely high evaporation, so good wind, a lot of sunshine, and low rainfall. Those three ingredients are ideal for salt production. In the world, there are three main regions for salt production, industrial salt. It's in India, in Mexico, and here in Australia. And between those three locations, we produce each approximately a third of all the seaborne industrial salt that goes to Southeast Asia and feed into those supply chains. One of the things that also make our project quite unique is our ability to load very large vessels. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the port further on. But what it does is allows us to load up to Newcastle Max. And for those of you who worked in the industry before, Newcastle Max is more than 200,000 tonnes. Now that allows us to reduce our shipping cost out to our customers and allows us to be more competitive in our industry. Almost lost the shaker. Go. Now I'll talk a little bit more about our three revenue streams. The first one is the one in the middle of your slide. That's from salt itself. So the salt production process is fairly simple. Use seawater, pump it into ponds. These ponds then take a long time, and as you saw in the video, I spoke about it, between 18 and 24 months, depending on the seasons and timing, for that salt to enter the first pond all the way until it's in final production. So it goes into the ponds. Then when it gets to the right density, we crystallize that salt into crystallizers. You can see that there with the little gradies on the picture. And then after that, it gets harvested. Our harvest is actually currently being fabricated here in Perth. And then after it's harvested, it goes through a salt plant. From there, onto the jetty, out to the transshipping vessel, and then onto ocean-going vessels. The second revenue stream is sulfate of potash. I'll talk a little bit about that, where we are in that process. Very important ingredient for food production. So it makes agricultural land much more productive, and specifically for those type of products like fruits and vegetables that is quite intense farming and requires a lot of nutrients in the process. And then the third revenue stream, which we only really started talking about in the last quarterly update, is our port. So in full production, our port will only be utilised 17% of the time. And for those of you who worked in ports before, if you spend 350 million on a port and you only use it for 17% of the time, you're not making a good decision. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Ultimately, we want to make sure we fill that port capacity up. Now, one of the topics that I'm sure we'll cover today is the approval process. In about the middle of April, we received our final approvals from the Commonwealth Government. What that allowed us to do is to start with full production. Now, in the salt world, what that means is you are filling all your ponds up, and those ponds are in production. So they're evaporating, they're getting denser, and you're getting your brine production going. Now, we are about 74% full of those ponds. That was as of yesterday, and we're aiming to be about 90% filled during the early stages of August. So progress has been made. One of the things we track in the salt production is how much salt is actually in your brine. Quite simple, you measure the density or you work out the salinity. Between those two elements, you can work out how much salt is in suspension, and for us, that's our working capital, or our working product, so product in process. With the volumes that we've been tracking, our forecast is to ship our first salt at the end of next year. That'll also depend on how hot the summer is, how much rain we get, a couple of those things. But we are on track to be able to deliver our first salt and ship by the end of next year. As far as construction progress is concerned, we are more than 60% complete in the capital expenditure for the project itself. You can see on the graph there, the green bar on the left-hand side, that is the capital we've already spent. And then there's more money we've committed in the light green. And the blue bit is the cost or the capital we still to spend. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. What's important though is what's in that. So a couple of things you can see on the screen there. We've got to finish the jetty. The ship loader is currently in Ashburton Port, and we expect that installation to commence during next week. And that'll be the final big lift for the jetty or the port construction. We still need to complete the dredging process. So dredging is currently under the EOI process, expression of interest. So for those in the room who are involved in the process, we invite you to come and talk to us afterwards as well. What's also outstanding is the salt plant construction part, so both fabrication and construction. So I know Sedgman, Steve's team is in the room. Steve, you want to put your hand up there? So Steve from Sedgman, his team is currently designing the plant, doing an excellent job. The next phase, once the design is progressed well enough, we will go out for tender and start with the construction process of a salt wash plant. Also currently out is the MPI, so all the non-process infrastructure, buildings, warehouse, maintenance facilities, that still needs to be done. And then I'm sure there's a couple of contractors in the room that does haulage. We still have to sign a haulage contract before we get into production. So trucks both from the crystallizers also to the port itself. And I do have Solomon here. Solomon, you want to speak your hand up? Solomon's from our commercial team, so come and speak to him afterwards. And Rob is also here. Rob, he's in the commercial team as well. He's leading the legal and commercial team. So if you are interested in those packages, please let us know. I've got a QR code at the back end as well that takes you straight to the landing page. Now I'll talk a little bit more about the salt market. So as part of our lender requirements, we had to sign up binding offtake agreements. We have done so with 3 customers. One of our customers is in China. I managed to visit their facilities as well as their port. There's another customer in Indonesia. And then the third one is in the Japan, Korea, Taiwan region, so importing into those regions. So those are our clientele. Now, if you can think about our consumption, many of our products we import from those regions, the final products, and so we feed into that production line. And most of those products starts out with with water and salt, and electricity is the 3 main ingredients into the beginning of that process. In terms of demand for salt, the expectation is that the salt demand will grow significantly over the next decade. This is driven primarily by the growth in Southeast Asia. So if you think about all those products that salt is used for, it's basically all the things that helps a population to grow or come out of poverty or improve their lives. I think about PVC pipes. Amazing how much salt goes into that. Now, more recently, we've been in contact with sodium-ion battery producers. And that technology has advanced significantly. And currently, there are vehicles in production that's got both a lithium battery as well as a sodium-ion battery in the vehicle. Of course, very stable, the salt batteries or sodium batteries, but also a lighter battery, so it creates longer range. So interesting to see how those elements are starting to impact the market going forward. You can also see on the bottom graph when we are going to come into production. So good timing for the Māori project, and we'll be able to bring us into profitability fairly soon. Now a little bit more about the potash side. I think it's well known in the room that there's been some difficulty in getting SOP projects up successfully. We do have a couple of advantages. Of course, we're on the coast, so from a cost of transportation perspective, that gives an advantage. Also, SOP is a byproduct of the salt production, so our main revenue will be coming from the salt itself, and if you produce that as a byproduct, we have the luxury of time, which if that's your only revenue stream, of course that makes it difficult. We want to make sure we crack that nut. I'm really excited to make sure we can solve that problem for Australia, and I've got a very good team working on the chemistry and learning on what might not have worked and make sure we do it successfully. So we are first going to build a pilot plant on site. One of the key things that we need to make sure is the weather conditions, climatic conditions for the Pilbara actually works for these plants. Chemical processes are notoriously sensitive to changes in climate, so that's a very important part we've got to test. We've also been working with a company called Blue Star. They're part of the broader Sinochem group of companies, and they have designed and helped with the construction of many successful SOP producers in mainland China. I went to visit them some months ago and actually looked at the piloting work that they've done on site. Very successfully produced SOP from our KTMS bitters, so from our salts that we produced on site already. However, we need to make sure that we can do that on site. With our conditions, sometimes in the Pilbara it gets north of 50, and in some of these test conditions, it really gets above 25, and those things does play a role on how well your chemistry work in those operations. So pilot plant design is underway, and then we'll build the pilot plant in location, operate for more than 12 months, make sure we iron out anything that we need to learn from that before we go to full production. Now a bit more about our port. I'm sure there's some of you in the room who's worked in the iron ore industry before. It's pretty clear to me, and I've spent most of my career on the East Coast, it's pretty clear to me in the Pilbara, of course, the ports are very much locked up by larger producers, and our view is that it creates an opportunity for smaller producers, or it makes it difficult for smaller producers to get off the ground because it's hard to get product out to the market. Long haul distances, of course, massive increase in cost, and actually very small quantities available at those existing ports. And you can see on the screen there, the other two multi-user ports down at Ashburton and Port Hedland, very low capacity available if a producer wants to come off. So where we play a key role, will play a key role, is providing access to the port for export of whatever product. In my mind, at the moment, it's iron ore, but there could be others, from that region that's within profitable or effective trucking distances from our port. I mentioned earlier, 17% of the utilization, so if you think about a 24-hour cycle, only 17%, or about 4 hours, is what that port will be used in that cycle. So a big opportunity for us to increase that with existing infrastructure. It also allows us to expand the port beyond that. That jetty that you saw in the video is being constructed to add conveyor belts to it to allow additional capacity to be transported across that infrastructure. Now, if you know about someone or you are interested in port capacity, I've got a QR code up there. That actually takes you straight to the landing page for expression of interests, and we've been contacted by a number of smaller companies who's interested in that, so that's just something to be aware of. In conclusion then, our project is well underway. We are in full operation, and the construction process and the approval process has been a journey. I've been almost 3 years in the role now, but I have to say it's been great to be able to solve some of these challenges with a team on a day-to-day basis. Now, one of the things that we will talk a little bit about later with Tim is we've got a red footy. Now, it's a red footy, physical red footy, the correct code for this region, and that red footy is the indicator of where the critical path is for our business. So where's the most important thing at that moment for our business? And it's been a long time with approvals, and Sean is not in the room, he's up in Karratha, but has been leading that process, and to the extent that that ball has been on his desk for so long that his daughter painted with the same face as Wilson had in that movie from Tom Hanks. So I don't have the footy with me today because right now I'm very happy to say that that footy is with operations because we're in full production. So it's on site actually with our general manager. Well, that's my conclusion. Thank you for listening, and we'll get into a Q&A shortly.
Thank you, David. Let's head over to the chairs. Just a reminder, if you would like to submit a question, as some have already done, just hit the Slido app just there. David, thank you so much. Hopefully we're all a bit more educated about the wonders of salt now. I must say, I sort of held my hand up a bit earlier. I had no idea that it was such a versatile product used in so many different ways. I'm guessing and hoping I'm not alone there.
Yeah, that's very true, Tim. It's interesting, even speaking to shareholders, myself and our CFO was on a roadshow to the East Coast last week, and the first part of the conversation is always about what is it used for, what's the industry like, and I was a bit like that when I started in this role. And where I learned the most was actually going to our customers, go around in their facilities and see what our product actually is used for. I remember very well, I was in China at Wanhua's facility, huge company, 30 billion US market cap. And they had a showroom at the beginning with all the products that is produced from their facility. And they had a car there. And literally the only component of that car that does not come with salt in its main production are the tires and the metallic structure of that. Wow. All the rest had little stickers on of that, how much salt is used in that. So fascinating to learn a bit about that.
Yeah. You showed us the shaker before and how salt is actually there, not just in the what's inside the shaker, but the making of the shaker itself. Can you tell how different is your product to what is inside that shaker? It certainly looks like, chunky little bits of salt from the pictures I've seen, but chemically, how different is it to that?
Well, the root or the source product is exactly the same, so salt from seawater. But salt comes out of seawater with magnesium in it, with calcium in it, lots of other products or other components. Those are all good for our health that we use, but in the chemical industry, they're only after the NaCl component, so the sodium chloride component. You guys hear me? Good. So it's only the NaCl component. So our end product uses, it needs to be more than 97% NaCl. You actually also use sodium in the medical industry. So you think about drips and so on, and that requires more than 99% NaCl in their product. We'll call it pharma grade.
You mentioned that you spent a large part of your career over east, as I understand, predominantly in coal. How did you come to be over on the other side of the country running something as different and unusual as a salt production?
Well, Tim, when I came to Australia, now probably 15 years ago now, I was interested in, I started in iron ore in my career, so platinum and then iron ore for a big part. And I ended up in the East Coast, and I always had a love or interest to come to WA. And part of that was, I heard a lot about the industry and how supportive of the mining industry WA is. But I think for me the link was I've been involved in a lot of civil side projects, so also big construction projects. I was involved in the Caval project, that was 2.6 billion. The Carmichael project, I think it was about 2.2 in the end for rail and mine construction. And those skills are completely transferable. It's large earth moving, marine component as well, and you just got to manage the costs really. So that's been a key bit for us to do.
Just indulge me for a moment. Talk us through, give us your idiot's guide to how exactly your evaporation process works. Because I understand you've got water coming in off the ocean. You obviously gather that water and it passes through a series of ponds, increasing its salt content as it goes. Is that? I mean, that's a very, very short version. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit, but keep it simple?
No problem. So there's two main components before the plant.
Yep.
It's the ponds and the crystallizers. So the ponds, as you described, gets the water denser over time, so you evaporate and you get more salty, basically.
Yep.
And then when that water is so salty that the salt is about to start to fall out of the water, so think about that point, that's about 1.33 density, then that salt will start to crystallize. And basically what it means is it forms crystals in the water and it drops down to the bottom. That's when you transfer that water into what we call the crystallizers, which is basically large, rectangular, flat areas, or call it dams, if you will. And that's where the salt then crystallizes and forms a pavement. Once your pavement is formed, you harvest that. There's the harvest I spoke about earlier. It's been made here in WA. You harvest that, put it in a truck, wash it, out in the jetty.
Yep.
So pretty simple process, very similar in most ways to all the other salt operations up and down the coast. And it's been done like that for many, many years.
Yep. You spoke a little bit about the environmental approvals process. I'm keen to know a bit more about that because we constantly hear how onerous it is and what an absolute nightmare it is to navigate through. You've obviously done it, so congratulations on getting to the finish line there. How did you find it?
Well, I think certainly it took quite a long time for us. It's, for a small business that is not in revenue yet, that certainly creates significant pressure. And I'm sure for those who've worked in smaller companies before, if that's your only project and your only revenue stream, it is really important to get that as quickly as you can. So I think that was our context, and we were already in construction, so even more so want to make sure our revenue is certain. What I would say though is if you are going through the approval process, there's three things that I think helped us a lot. So first of all, if you have time, make sure you get those approvals in as early as possible. Now for those with multiple operations, it takes of course planning to know when you're going to require your next approval. Add a couple of years to that and that's when you should start. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to make sure that the team that is looking after this is absolute specialist in that. So one of the particular things we had to go through is demonstrate that the groundwater impacts of our operation will not be detrimental to the environment. That's quite a specialist skill. So the person in our team who's looked after that is Dr. Sean Meredith. He comes from he actually did his PhD in water, one of the topics in water. So a really deep knowledge about that. So I think the second thing is the team. The third thing is, as a leader, you have to obsess over the detail. So I spend a lot of time actually reading the plan, actually understanding what it is, contributing to it in some way. So I remember Sean asking me, he sent me a flow diagram, say, can you understand that? Because I need to make sure it's simple. I read that, I was like, ooh, I'm not sure if I can understand that. Let me see if I can make it simpler. So, and that was just so I can understand it because I want to make sure we can translate that. So I think that's the three things. Now on the last thing, I think it's really important to remember that the organizations or the authorities approving these plans has got hundreds of plans to look after. And for that, of course, they have to share that load. And it does mean that you can help, if you're across the detail, you can help to communicate that the plan is compliant with the conditions, it's met all the requirements because you've actually read it, and make sure that you've got that alignment at all levels of government.
Is that a nice way of saying, giving them a bit of a nudge every now and then?
I think regular communication is really important, and you've got to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I've learned a lot about groundwater in the last 2.5 years, and I think, yes, making sure that you've got clear, open channels with them, and that you're clear that their role is to verify that you've complied with the Act and that you've complied with the conditions, and you need to know whether you've done that or not.
Your particular project obviously has a parcel of land. You've got some coastline as well. Given that you are interacting, I suppose, with the marine environment, did that make the approvals process even more complex? You've got bird life to worry about, sea life to factor in as well. Where did that fit in with the approvals process?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that took a lot of time for us to clearly articulate is that in these coastal areas, your water system is actually tidally influenced twice a day. And most of the water models accounts for static water tables, and often the conditions relates to the impact in a static water table that might change over the season, but not massive changes twice a day. So we had to take a lot of time to, first of all, measure the water levels, salinity levels. I know Monotel is here today, so they've helped us with installing those bores. That helped us to track it, and they've got to use that data to actually explain how this model is perhaps different to what those regulators has worked on all other projects.
We hear about the presence of often a rare and endangered bird, for instance, can scupper a whole project. I understand you had to do some monitoring of bird life in the area as well?
Yeah, so shorebirds is a one of the key species we had to demonstrate that we are not impacting. With a salt operation, we actually have a very positive impact on that. You create large habitat. I was on site not too long ago, and we had migratory shorebirds on site that actually came from Asia in their migration. So yes, those things are important. We had sea turtles to look after, so a lot of research we had to do on the islands. There was a sea snake, lots of different, of those.
What sea snake got into the pond?
No, sea snake, we had to study sea snakes,
Right.
demonstrate that there's no impact to sea snakes. So in the approvals framework, they call it M&ES, or Matters of National Environmental Significance. So you've got to demonstrate that you haven't been impacting that. So those things take time. You've got to study them, and we spent at least 4 million so far on these studies to demonstrate that we're not impacting these species.
Like people actually just out there.
Yeah, we've got
bird spotting.
We've got marine fauna observers. Yeah, all sorts of different different works. Our one of the big bills is for observations on the islands. So go and do studies. Haven't found a lot of turtles, but that's one of those things we had to do.
And you were saying before that it's even some fish have found their way into the.
Yeah, I believe
ponds
it's
as
the
well.
osprey's fault. That's my theory. So there was much bigger fish than I expected in the first pond.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of ospreys that's nested there.
Yeah.
Our primary intake, and I believe they are the culprits that brings the fish in.
Just slowly brining themselves in the ponds. They should be delightful by the time they get
Going for dinner.
get to the final pond. You spoke about the Pilbara and how ideal it is for this kind of operation. You've got obviously abundant land, sunshine. The water there right on your doorstep. Are you surprised that we don't have a project of this scale already in that part of the world? Because the conditions seem pretty perfect.
I think, Tim, of course there are existing operations been there for a long time. What I am surprised by is that it hasn't been a new project for 25 years plus.
Yeah.
We are, in terms of location to export to our customers, or the region that's consuming most of the salt, we are on such a good location. Your shipping costs can be really competitive. The climatic conditions, there are areas in China that we visited that they need, for the size of land that we used, they can only produce 10% of the salt per year because they don't have such good conditions.
Yeah.
One of our customers are in Indonesia. They've got high rainfall, 2+ meters a year. Again, you can't build salt evaporation ponds in those regions. So I think we're very blessed. And I think there's going to be enough demand for more projects to come off the ground.
Yep. It is in a fairly cyclone-prone part of the world. Is that ever a factor? And some of the storm surges that come along with cyclones, is that a hazard for your operations?
Oh, absolutely. So I think cyclones will be impacting salt operations. What I would say though is you would have seen those amber dots on the map earlier. Those operations have been there since the 60s. Even earlier, some of them. And they've been in successful production through all those cyclones. It's been, in the Pilbara. So that's the first thing. So the operations are resilient, and you do get a shorter-term impact, but you work through that in terms of your production process. The second thing I think that I'd like to point out, we've designed the ponds in such a way that water from inland actually gets diverted around the ponds, because one of the main challenges you get with these ponds is you get dilution, so freshwater dilution of your ponds. That slows your process down. So with Cyclone Sean, we had about just over 120 millimeters of rain that fell, and we measured the ponds before and after the event, and the pond levels only increased by 120 mil.
Yeah.
So what that tells me is only the rain that fell on those ponds actually ended up.
Yeah.
So important consideration. Just got to make sure the operation is resilient.
Tell us about the interest you've had in the port facility, which is an amazing asset to have, I imagine. I don't think we've ever had anyone come into a room like this and spruik access to a Pilbara port. I mean, that's new ground in here, I think. Do you have people falling over themselves to get to you?
Well, yeah, we've been pretty fortunate. Already 8 proponents has reached out to us for potential capacity. Now, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg for some of these operations. For them to be able to start the operation, or if they've got a lease, they have to have access first so the business model can work. They've got to work out their trucking costs. So I think some of these things will take a bit of time to get off the ground. But yeah, I think certainly it creates a great avenue for increased capacity out of our region.
I know we've had a couple of questions come through about your potash as well, and you mentioned that others have tried and unfortunately failed, haven't been able to make potash work as a viable product. What makes you think that you're going to be different? Is it purely that it's only one avenue of revenue for you? You've got the port and the salt as well. Is that the key to making potash a success?
Well, there's certainly a couple of differences. First of all, it's really important that you take the time required with what I'm going to call an outcomes-based schedule. So with chemical processes and getting these things right, you have to allow those testing to happen, and sometimes you find something in the process that requires a couple of more things to be verified. Now for us, our main revenue is from salt. The difference, of course, for those other smaller producers that unfortunately has not worked out is, in my view, they had significant pressure from a debt or a finance perspective, and therefore had to find a way to get revenue as early as possible. And when you do that, it's very hard to create stable chemical processes because you've got a bunch of chemists trying to stabilize the process, but the production manager wants production to come out. So I think that's one thing I would say. The other thing, I think location, very far from the coast, so your transportation costs impacts your ability to get it to coast. And then thirdly, we're also using seawater. So when you use underground aquifers, your chemistry can vary, and seawater, very stable chemistry. And I think those three ingredients gives us a leg up to get this solved.
Yep. You mentioned the demand coming from Southeast Asia, particularly for products like PVC piping, also the emergence of sodium-ion batteries. Are they going to be two of the standout products that are going to fuel the demand for your products, or do you expect that there'll be other drivers in the future as well?
Yeah, so our customers in those regions produce two main products. It's either chlor-alkali or soda ash. And the chlor-alkali in any of those poly products, that's what it's used for. Glass production, we haven't spoke too much about that. Soda ash, aluminium production, so I think solar panels, all of that gets used. So those are the two main ingredients. We haven't really counted on sodium-ion batteries. It's an emerging technology, and of course we're hopeful that that'll take off and be very successful. What is hard to determine is exactly how much salt goes into a battery. Of course, those with these technologies are pretty guarded about their technology, as you would expect. So chlor-alkali and soda ash are the two main products.
Having major flashbacks to Year 12 chemistry now and realising how much have slipped out of my brain in the years since. A few questions from the audience. Thank you so much for those who've submitted a question. One here from the floor. What proactive steps have you taken to improve asset maintenance and longevity against the corrosive nature of your product? Salt's a killer, isn't it, for equipment?
That's a very, very well-informed question. So certainly the maintenance of pumps, I think graders, loaders, trucks, all those items will have a more frequent service program. If I think about the jetty, that's a good example. We've got what we call cathodic protection. Basically, it's a way that there's a certain component of the structure that you've dedicated for that to rust, nothing else. So that helps to lengthen the life of your permanent infrastructure. But I think if you think about mobile equipment, you will have to have higher service intervals, and your inspections need to be really good. The one component that often happens with these machines in the salt industry is you get loose connections. So electricity, actually it corrodes some of the connections. So they use what we call denso tape, so tape around those to ensure it doesn't corrode. So there's a lot of those specific things that need to be done to ensure they last longer, and your inspection routines are more regular than you might have in operations.
Rigorous maintenance.
Yeah.
How are you powering the project?
So the energy used for salt production, more than 99% of that comes from the natural process of evaporation and from the wind. For that less than 1%, our project is quite spaced out. So for us, if I compare it to Perth, if you go to the primary seawater intake, you'll be at Fremantle. If you go all the way to the airport, that's when you get to the jetty. So a very big difference between those. So do have localized diesel generation for some of these electric pumps. So they're all electric pumps and ready for if there's a technology that can help us 24/7. In the longer run, our objective is to get solar support during the day My view is that that'll only probably be when we're at steady state production, because that's when our power demand is more viable for that capital investment.
All right. Final question, very topical. It's always front and centre in the news cycle at the moment. Tell us about BCI's exposure to fluctuations in US tariffs on China and Australia.
Yeah,
Are you exposed to that at all?
Well, I see that as an opportunity, Tim. I'm not sure how many of the audience has read, in the AFR was an article yesterday about almond prices that's gone up 80%, selling into China. And for those who haven't read the article, there are big nut farmers in South Australia. They're importing into China. That market used to be controlled by California, big, I think 70% of the market, but now it's allowed our farmers to get an 80% uplift in price. So for us, our approach is let's look at opportunities. Where are the opportunities? The market will change. Your supply chains will change, and people might, China might divert products here or vice versa, and I think that creates opportunity. So we're just keeping a watchful eye on that. The US gets most of their salt from Mexico, and we already compete really well with Mexico.
Yeah. David, we are out of time, I'm afraid. I'll get you to stay there, though. I'll invite Danny Tarmody back up to the stage for a more official vote of thanks. But thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
So a huge thank you to David Boshoff and Tim for holding that, what do we call it, fireside chat. Fascinating to hear how much of a multifaceted product salt is, being in glassware, crockery and textiles. I certainly learnt a new thing today. And that by utilising Cape Preston Port, it's a lot easier to get your product to market, obviously, than other competitors, and allows BCI to expand into the future, and that you have allowed an expression of interest to welcome those of us in the room who can inquire about company, to provide company capability to your business, which is very refreshing. Thank you so much.